a discussion between Claudia, who is the chair of the DEI panel, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and asking some difficult conversational questions will be Dan Haggerty. He is the president of BNI USA. So I'll have you guys take it over. I'll be in the chat monitoring your questions. If you have any questions, put them right into the Q&A so we don't miss anything. And we will get started right now.
Thanks, Steve. Hi, Claudia.
Hi, Dan.
So first of all, and I warned Claudia and Steve this, and I actually sent a picture of my surroundings to Claudia. So we're in the process of relocating, and today is move day. And so this is the very first meeting I'm taking from the new house. I, as recently as 30 minutes ago, didn't know if my internet would work, and I was like, thank God. And so right now I am standing in my new bathroom. And so, and within the next half an hour, it's very possible that the movers will be here and my children will be here. So I'm a little nervous, but I think we're going to get through this, Claudia.
I almost want to see what happens if it falls apart, but that's cool. So yeah.
so let's get started. So I'm excited for this. We talked about setting this up a long time ago. You know, for those of you who don't know, Claudia or I, we work together pretty closely. We started the DEI panel. I'm thinking we started taking applications probably last like June or July timeframe.
Yeah, in the summer. Yeah, definitely like around July. Yep.
Yeah. So Claudia leads that, and then I am sort of like, I'm kind of on the panel, and I'm kind of like a liaison back into BNI. But I do look forward to maybe as we get through today, we can talk a little bit about some of the things that the panel has done and will be doing, and some of the things that you can all learn about at conference. So I think that's one thing we can definitely touch on. But I think having the panel was step one. I was excited about that.
Yeah, definitely. I think because so many people know the story of when I attended Global Conference in Thailand in 2018, it was like the same question I asked every year, like, what about diversity? What about diversity? And it's like, oh, we used to do something with that. And it was never like, and it was something that wasn't lasting. So I think when you and I started talking and building this thing and reaching out to people, that we wanted it to be something that would outlive the news cycle. So I think that we've been successful in that. So
yeah, that was actually, I mean, we were talking at the time, like there was an onslaught of where does BNI stand on this issue? Where's our statement? And I know we were slow to release it, but I think that you and I talked a lot, and we said exactly what you just said. We want something that's going to outlast the news cycle, because we know that there are certain companies that are going to respond to different issues that are happening at any given point in time, and they're going to check the box. Whereas what we're doing, I think, is sort of a long-term, you know, it's a long-term thing. It's not just, hey, here's our statement, and then we move on. This is like a panel that's meeting every other week, and I think we're producing a lot of real change. So kudos to you and the panel. And I know we have a lot of the panel members on today, so hi everybody.
Yeah, no, and to you as well. I mean, we a lot of this stuff, a lot of times people will congregate and get together and talk about things that they want to change, but you can't actually do it if you don't have the backing of the organization. And so you have been that for us. So absolutely. So thank you as well.
Yeah, no, it's been an honor. So let's jump into it. We named this Uncomfortable Conversation. So, you know, the first thing that I think we need to talk about is definitions, right? So, you know, you and I have chatted about this before. You know, African American or Black or Brown, Asian American, AAPI, LGBT, LGBTQ, you know, DEI, DBI, D&I. There's a lot. Can you help us navigate?
To avoid having to take up the entire time that we have, I think, so I'll start with the DEI, D&I, right? So like a lot of times people used to hear prior probably to last summer more about diversity and inclusion, right? That there was like diversity and inclusion, but there was this piece missing about equity. And so diversity is like the aesthetics, like the optics of like, what do I see when I walk in a room? And it's like, who is there? So it's like all the people, all the different representations. And so while organizations were doing that, right, through different programs and outlets, And even B&I, you know, people thinking like, oh, look, we have someone, we're not all one way. I think that and then the inclusion is supposed to be where they're involved a little bit more, like they're engaged a little bit more, but the equity piece was often missing. And so the equitable piece, when we're talking about that, is like, we are on the same page. Like you and I, Dan, we have all the same opportunities afforded to us. Like as far as this organization that we belong to, or anything that comes our way, that we are on even footing. And so that's what we wanted to have when we talk about being, you know, all the way from the chapters, but even throughout our organization. We didn't want it to be just about the members or just about the directors and above. And so that's what we were talking about. So that's DEI, diversity, inclusion, and belonging, right? So DBI as well. Like the belonging piece is really feeling like I'm a part of this. Like I feel I can say anything, I can do anything, and really be fully self-expressed. And so I think it's a lot of times I don't have to hide. You know, some of us in our community, in the Black community, we call it code switching, right? Where we have to turn off. I can't really say what I want to say, or I can't really tell you about what I did this weekend because it might be something that you judge, or it's not the same thing that you would do. And so I think a lot of times when we're thinking about it from a perspective of being a member in a chapter and somebody feeling comfortable to say whatever they want, and at the risk of being judged, I think that is something that we have to look at. So that's what we really wanted to have that. And most of us on the panel, who are people of diverse backgrounds, all had a similar story where we didn't feel fully like we can be ourselves. And so I think that that's the piece. The other thing that you mentioned about was like African American compared to Black. I think it's a preference. I think African American is very limiting. So I'm first generation American. I present as Black, though I am half part of the Latina community, or Latinx, depending on what you want to say. And then I'm also Caribbean. So it's to be presumptuous and make an assumption that everybody is African American is different, right? So I think if you just call people, and I think people used to be nervous about saying Black. Is it okay if I say Black?
Exactly. I mean, it's like kind of getting in order to have conversations like this. It's like, wait, what is the preferred word, right? And I think a lot of times that's why the conversation doesn't even begin.
Right. And some people might be more comfortable with African American. Like you want to check in, if you know, you don't have to, you can say, but I feel like Black covers everyone who presents as Black, right? Or brown, or it could be, you know, brown is a range, right? It's often maybe somebody who's racially ambiguous. They might be, you know, they might be Central American or South American. They may be South Asian. It doesn't matter. So I think that there's ways. Then there's the BIPOC, right? Black, Indigenous, people of color. So there's different terms that people have. So those are just some of the acronyms. I figured if you all out there are listening, wondering what all this stuff means, that's basically in a nutshell what it means.
And not to jump ahead, but I know like we were working on the glossary as part of the DEI panel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
And
yeah.
So,
Yeah. So, well, yeah, exactly. Because even in B&I, right, when we say things like MSP, like we want people to say member success program. It's not, we can't make assumptions. When a new member comes in, they're like, there's all these things being CEUs, like they don't know what you're talking about. So try to avoid using acronyms as much as possible, right? Or I mean, it can be as quick as a Google search. But if someone says AAPI, they're not familiar with it, that opportunity, then that's something that you talk about. You know, like that's something that you want to just kind of like let people know and use those maybe full out sometimes. It depends.
Yeah. There actually a question came in that Steve's probably keeping track of. It just popped up. So she says, so which is better term to use, Black or African American?
I mean, it's hard to, at the same time, like I am one Black person. I'm not speaking for everybody. I feel like overall, if you're going to be general, I feel Black is fine because it covers, you know, that someone is Black. If you're not sure if someone is a little bit more, like my son is biracial, so he is racially ambiguous. Sometimes he's been called Asian, sometimes he's been called of Latin descent, or all kinds of, or Middle Eastern. And so if you want to check in with someone and ask them, you know, how as they identify, I think that's perfectly fine. But for the most part, I think saying Black is fine. It's fine with me. Yeah.
I remember you and I were chatting.
Can I jump in a sec here?
Yeah.
Just the way the question is written, saying Black or African American, I'm seeing a lowercase b on Black and being
Oh, thank you,
grammar.
Steve.
I thought maybe we'll talk about that as well.
I always notice that, and I know you noticed that as well, being someone who's
Steve's very grammatically driven.
yes,
so.
yes. But Steve and I have also had multiple conversations about that. So yes, so it is a capital B. It is a capital B when you're speaking about people. So that's something that is the case. It's not a lowercase b. So I wanted to put that out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember you and I were talking once, and I called you African American, and you're like, well, actually, I'm not. I'm Black, and I'm like, oh, I just screwed that up. So
You messed it all up. You messed it all up. I'm just no. It was fine. It was fine, but I just corrected you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You sort of mentioned, you were talking about like, hey, we're doing different things this weekend, right? And when you were just going through all the different definitions and stuff, and how you're doing one thing and you may not feel comfortable talking about it because that may make another person judge you, right? And same thing for me. So my question to you is, that's essentially microaggressions, right? Can you start to talk about a little bit of microaggressions, microaffirmations, and what kinds of things might present themselves even in the context of like a B&I meeting?
Oh, goodness. Yes. Thank you. That is a great question. So yeah, so microaggressions are things that are like assumed about someone, right? Based on the way that they are, right? Like their demographic. And so an easy one is like to make an assumption. A lot of times, especially when I was younger and my son was younger, I was a single mom. I was a single Black mother, right? In a chapter, I was divorced, but people made assumptions I was never married. They made assumptions, oh, does he know the father? Like there was all these questions that were like, kind of like, yikes, to me, but like, I was like, oh, okay, whatever. But there's these things. So like, if I don't want to talk about, to play into any stereotypes, I didn't want to have to share like, yeah, I had a tough weekend, right? Like I had, people were divorced. It wasn't like that was weird, but because of who I was, my demographic, my background, whether that's my thoughts or not, but because of how I know people, the stereotypes, I was nervous or concerned to talk about those things. And so I think, microaggressions are just things that you say, you make assumptions about like washing my hair, or something else. And microaffirmations are really great because it's like you go above and beyond out of your way to like recognize someone that might normally not, you might not have noticed, right? To let them know that they're appreciated. And I think you actually doing a fantastic job of this because you really do go out of your way to do this. I've seen you do it before with myself and with others as well in the organization. And so I think that makes a difference. And I've got people actually call me saying, wow, Dan called to check on me. We have members in Minneapolis that, and directors in Minneapolis, and you checked in like during the trial, the George Floyd trial that was happening, actually it's Dr. Derek Chauvin trial. You checked in, like you called me like minutes before the verdict was in, like that meant a lot. Like an executive of your position, right, would normally not happen. I've been in corporate America for my entire adult life, and that does not happen. And so I think that makes a big difference, like reaching out or just saying like, hey, I noticed your numbers, like just reaching out and rather than pointing out the bad, but actually like inspiring and lifting people up is like huge. So I really, want to let people know, because I don't think they know this about you, like how much you do it, how often, and what it means to people. So yeah.
How do we encourage, because it can be awkward, right? Like sitting there, like looking at the phone saying, this is not going to be an easy conversation. Like how do you recommend that? So I'm white, you're Black. There's the news cycle right now is not good. Like picking up the phone to talk about this stuff. I mean, it's difficult, right? Like people don't want to do it like naturally. How do we, is the discussion part of fixing the problem?
So, the thing that gets to be a lot is, hey, Claudia, like when people share very violent content, like just to let everyone knows anything that's violent, like right now there's stuff going on in Palestine, Israel, like there's things happening. Be responsible when you're sharing. There's like content warnings, there's trigger warnings, because you don't know what comes up for people. And a lot of times, I got that George Floyd video sent to me. I've never watched the video ever to this day. I don't need to see it to know what happened. I didn't want that image in my head, given especially stuff that has happened to me that has been very traumatic. But a lot of people will send that. It's like, isn't this messed up? Look what this person said. Look at this video of this guy saying all these racist things. It's like, okay, like, I don't need to, thank you. Like maybe it's like, oh, hey, there's something, just giving a heads up. And I'm not knocking the people that have done this already, but it's just something to be responsible for, because it's already very daunting. Now, it's different, like I mentioned, when you reach out, Steve has reached out, like when people reach out and just check in and just create space, some people may not respond to you. I don't get back to everybody that does sometimes because of where I'm at in the moment. It's not like I'm like, I don't have to, and they shouldn't be expected to have to discuss these things at length or have to respond, like when something like this happens, because it's very impactful, right? Like, the most recent, while the trial was going on, Dante Wright was killed. And, my son is like his age. He looks kind of like my son. So that was very hard to like deal with given my dad just had a stroke. Like there was so many things happening that we have to take on. And I think people just to even like say, hey, just thinking of you, I have to, Harmony, who's in charge of our core operations, like she was great. She just checked in, even like to see how my dad was. Like these things mean a lot. And I think checking in with people and asking them how they're doing makes such a difference.
So if I'm a BNI member and I'm in a chapter, is this something that like maybe I just call out of the blue, or do I have a one-to-one? I mean, is this stuff that like, because in BNI, we've always said like BNI is for business, right? We're here to pass business referrals. And, and historically, we've even said, no politics and no religion, right? We've used that for now 36 years, and we still use it. And we still, encourage our members and leadership teams and directors to avoid politics and religion at all costs. Mm-hmm. So how did this become different and sort of kind of evolve past that? When did you see that happen and why? I apologize for I don't have any glassware in the house yet, so I just have an orange Solo cup. I saw myself take a drink earlier, and like I really need to explain this next time I need a drink, because it's probably
the orange Solo.
For those of you who joined late, I'm moving into a new house. I'm sequestered in my bathroom, and it's a long story, but sorry.
What was the question again, Dan? I forgot the question that you just asked.
Sorry. Religion and politics. So this,
yes.
Sorry. So
I got it now.
When did we kind of cross the chasm to where like this is not necessarily covered under that blanket statement?
Yeah, so such a great question. So yeah, I mean, I think being locked in our houses was one thing, right? We kind of like time passed because we were like, well, what makes this incident, and I'm speaking about George Floyd's murder, what makes this incident the one? Like what was about this one, right? It just impacted people differently. And I think people had time, right before that, months before, there was, Breonna Taylor had come out about, that incident had come out. But even before, Ahmaud Arbery on a jog, right now we're just going into like they're pleading, how they're pleading, and they're about to get into that trial. So it was like, I think people started to notice, and I had started to see it with Ahmaud Arbery a little bit, but definitely something about George Floyd, like everyone kind of watching. Some people felt they needed the video to kind of have proof, like, wow, this is not right. This is not okay. This is what people have been saying for years. I'm starting to get it. And I feel like sort of the calm of the state that we were in, right? A lot of people were just going through stuff. We were just in a different place. And I think people started to be in the same place too, of like the pandemic, like people started having real concerns and they could relate to people from other backgrounds. Right. I felt like that was the moment. So I think that kind of set it up for us. And then leading into it, then it became more obviously this very huge, like global event, right? This global sort of thing that happened, and it impacted everyone, like everyone in the world was talking about this. And I think it was something hard to deny. It was very, we all watched it. It was, except me. But people watched it, talked about it, understood. And I think that was the thing that kind of pivoted, right? So now, and especially, again, even people during the pandemic, like people are in with their kids and, My son went to walk his dog. Like, I don't know if he's going to slam the door when he comes back or not. I have no idea, but like people started becoming more understanding and feeling more authentic. That's what I see as the case. And so I feel that we were able to start to kind of cross lines. We started already. We're like, oh, sorry, the baby, my hair is not done. People started feeling more comfortable in that space. We saw this on our chapter meetings. So I think that when we had that, we could start to cross over and be like, okay, these are human beings. Like, we're inside of people's homes. Like, this is not just like, okay, what's on the agenda? Thank you. And pretend like everything is fine. So if you had people that were impacted from these communities, most recently in the AAPI community, which is the Asian American Pacific Islander community, like these are real things. It's like checking in on people. So I think people started to feel a little bit better about checking in, and it's not politics and it's not religion. It's not anything to do with those things. We're not praying. We're not talking about, any type of, elected officials necessarily. Some people had, but it was specifically talking about human beings and how we can make an impact.
When Ivan created, and of course I'm putting words in his mouth, which is dangerous, but my assumption would be that when no politics and no religion started, at whatever point in our history that started, my impression would be that it was a blanket, nothing but business should exist within this world, right? Do you think we've figured out a good way to bridge the gap between what you just said and our history of don't cross the bridge?
Yeah,
and I mean, the answer can be no. I mean, I know we're still working.
no, I think we're starting to get there, right? Because, and we're noticing, you and I have noticed, like, the chapters that are more diverse, right, that are more open to this conversation are actually growing. They're actually expanding. Like Dr. Meisner, I was on his podcast talking about some of these things, but you start to notice when you start reaching out even to like different professions and different neighborhoods and communities, you're going to have a whole new network to play with. Oftentimes, if it's the same people who do the same activities and do this and have the same clients, it's like the overlap is it's huge. And there's very little people from outside. It's like we all have the same friends. We're all doing the same thing. So that's why it's great. The more that you expand and the reach, it's better. So I think having said that, understanding that more people, and we're not talking just about race, we're not talking about all these other things. Like someone can be, you can't always tell if somebody, based off, what someone's sexual orientation is, right? Or what their pronouns are, like how do they identify? What's their gender identity? Able-bodied, right? Like different able-bodied compared to disabled. Like there are so many different aspects that we can talk about, and we want to be able to create a space. So I think more people are getting on board with that after seeing some of the stuff that we've seen and suffering together and rising through together as a country. So I think that now we are starting to do that. So some of the chapters that have been open, they're not doing it in the meetings necessarily. Maybe they have some people have had education moments. We are creating those modules, but I think it's like some people wanted, not to be like the highlight at the same time. I think it's a question, but I think it's important for us to have the tools available. So if they did want to, and the chapters aligned on that, then that's different. And I think that that's just the way that it's going to be. We can't monitor every single chapter of what they're going to do, but we hope that it does stay mostly focused on how to grow their businesses.
In speaking of the tools, and and I know that we've got, and Samantha just texted or wrote, I love it, can't wait to get the tools. So I know we're going to chat for about 5 more minutes and then take some questions, and Steve said that there's some good ones. But so speaking of the tools, so the DEI panel has been meeting now for probably 6 to 9 months, let's say. And I know we were preparing for sort of a lot of unveiling of content at the US conference. So if you're watching this and you have yet to register, maybe Steve can throw it in the chat, but it's bniusevents.com. So we have more diversity, equity, and inclusion representation at conference this year than I think we've ever had. Can you maybe share a preview of some of the things that the DEI panel has been working on and some of the things that we'll see at conference next week? I forgot to mention, it's next week. It's next Thursday and Friday.
It's next Thursday and Friday. We're super excited. So yeah, I mean, I've gone to several conferences, I don't know. And a lot of times before even, I felt like it wasn't a place for me. Like I was like, not even as a woman or a woman of color, but just like kind of like there was certain people that went for BNI conferences and that was it. So this is for everybody and people that you've even wanted who are interested in growing their businesses. That's the first step. I want to make mention of that non-members can attend as well. We have 3 diversity modules coming out. So 3 DEI talks. One is for members, which is really great. So that I believe that's the one that I'm doing with Charlotte. And it's going to talk about the power of authenticity, more about blending in. I have some really great stories to share. So does Charlotte. And other ways that, it's just a nice, candid conversation. So that is one of them that we have. We have ones for directors. So some of the folks that are on the call, it's called for our launch, fill, and retain efforts. So ways to launch new chapters that are more diverse, and then fill the chapters as well. And of course, retain the members that we have in different ways. We have a handbook that we're introducing as well at that time, and they're going to go over those things as well. And then of course, we have for our executive directors who oversee certain regions, we have a great one as well. Michael Brathwaite and Rachel Cherney are going to be running that one as well, more for executive directors and ways that they can, integrate and add these tools for their director team so that the members feel more comfortable, right? And so we have those modules. We also have more presenters, different presenters presenting on non-diversity topics that are of diverse backgrounds, which is really great. I have the pleasure, I'm so excited. I still don't know if this was a good choice or not, but I'm going to be co-emceeing this event with Jenny Butts, who's our director of sales and marketing. We've never had, I don't even know if we've had women emceeing, I'm not sure. But most of the time it's usually, it's been a new day. And Jenny and I, we were on a call earlier and we were so excited about this, that there are women running it behind the scenes and women in front of it. And so there's so much diversity happening. It's going to be, I think, our best conference yet. And so, yeah, so if you are not sure if this is something for you, besides all of the other great modules and breakout sessions that they're going to have and keynotes, there's definitely lots and lots of diversity.
That's great. And then as far as the panel goes, like beyond what we'll see, I mean, some of the things that I know we've been working on at the panel is, taking a look at, like you mentioned it earlier, like the 3+1 guidebook. Like if you're in a chapter and you believe what Ivan says, which is that more, Dr. Meisner, that more diverse chapters is better for everyone for so many different reasons. We've got, great content on, how to make that happen, right? So we've got the guidebook, we've got, training modules coming out that are going to help you navigate some of these waters. I mean, we've got a lot of tools that we've created over the course of the last 9 months. And I think this is just the beginning, really. Yeah,
no, the training modules are going to be fantastic. They're going to be available on BNI Business Builder. They're going to have some live virtual trainings. We're going to create some education moments, like so many things that we're going to have, and sensitivity training, like some things, tips and tools for the directors and above to support their not only the director teams, but also the leadership teams and the members.
Yep.
We want to make sure that everyone feels welcome, that everyone feels included. And so that's really what we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. I know Steve wanted to come on at 3:30 to ask a couple of questions. I didn't get through all of mine, but I assume that they're probably in the chat. So Steve, did you want to walk us through about 15 minutes of question?
Yeah, sure. Before we get into the Q&A section, there was one in comments, I think which is a good one, which from Kezia, who says, how should we address positive racist myths like the Asian model minority?
Ooh, Kezia said that?
Yep.
Hey, Kezia. Yeah, so, oh my goodness, there's so many. I had this question when I was with BNI Hawaii, actually, and they had asked something similar, I think, yeah, like, I think the way to address it, I wish we could have one of our actual, like, panel members of the community share this. But I think one of the ways to combat that is to just understand the same thing with Black people or anything that you might have against a certain religion, like any kind of like myths or stereotypes, is really getting to know someone. So if you're in a chapter, have a conversation. Like oftentimes I hear a member like, oh, I didn't know such and such was this. That's so cool, because they finally had a one-to-one. Like, you be the one to reach out, because a lot of times they may not feel comfortable. So don't make assumptions about their upbringing, or, if they, they grew up a certain way, or they think a certain way, or they're going to be receptive to certain things. I think that that's the way that we shatter that, is actually getting to know the people. We have the tools in place. Dr. Meisner created this whole organization and the way that it's set up based on, so that we can truly get to know, like, and trust each other. So I think when we finally sit down with people, people are often amazed, like, oh, I had no idea. I had no idea that you thought this way, or I had no idea that you were into this. So that way you can shatter that without coming with your own mindset or notions about someone. So I think that that's one huge way that we can do that.
Okay, great. So we've got 2 questions related to Black versus African American, and they're both pretty much this: is it rude to ask the person which they prefer? The person who wrote this anonymous one said, I feel I'm calling attention to the differences.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. I don't get offended myself, but again, I mean, most people, they say African American. I told Dan, just because I can tell Dan whatever, like, it's not whatever, but we're close, so I can say that to him, and just say, hey, like, that's not how I identify. So, I mean, I don't think it's something, this in particular is something that you have to, but just getting curious about someone, like, and having a conversation, I think it depends on the person, your relationship with them. But I think saying, I don't think you have to have that conversation. It's very different. I cannot speak for every single Black person in America, because everybody is different. So, yeah.
Okay. Great. Okay, how about this one? Can B&I groups decide to be decidedly anti-racist or focused on embodied anti-racist? Or is there another way to show our BIPOC colleagues that we are a welcoming and inviting space for them and their business?
Can I take a stab, Claudia?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because we have experience with this situation. I'll bring up some of the experience that we had. So, and I think it was before the panel was created, but maybe the same general time frame. We had a chapter. It was probably 30 to 40 members, and it was in a relatively progressive part of a progressive city. And there was a contingent of the chapter. I don't know if it was half, but it was definitely a good portion of it that wanted to be decidedly proactive and anti-racist. And the other portion of the chapter, which I think may have been the majority, but let's say it was 50-50, they wanted to stick to just business and let's not wade into those waters. They never went one way or the other, but they continued to, there were educational moments, there were feature presentations. I mean, you could tell based on the emails that were coming into Claudia and I that this was becoming a lightning rod topic, and it was basically turning the 90-minute meeting into, I never visited the chapter, which unfortunately I should have, but it definitely doesn't sound like it was a B&I meeting at this point in time. The president decided to stop the meeting for, I think, a week or two, maybe, so that they could kind of enter into like this cooling off period. And ultimately, I don't know that they ever got back together and the chapter disbanded. So this has always been a cautionary tale for Claudia and I, because, I think from our perspectives, we do feel, comfortable with certain elements of this being discussed at certain points within the chapter meeting, right? Like, Claudia, you and I were talking about the announcements section. Like, if there's something coming up, you can make an announcement. I think other chapters where if this is a much more divisive topic, maybe you have to determine if that's the right chapter for you. Or you can have, meet. I'll tell you one other thing. So we had a chapter once, this is a similar kind of a topic, chapter that wanted to pray before their meetings. And of course, people were like, no, you can't pray before this meeting. And so some of the things that we talked about with that chapter was, why don't you have a meeting before the meeting, for this group of individuals that want to come together and focus on this? And so I think there's a variety of different solutions. I don't have the solution. We don't have a manual for the solution. And depending on your chapter culture, this could be a lightning rod like it was for the chapter that I just mentioned. We're working on it. We're trying to take best practices from what we've seen But I don't know if it exists yet. Did I capture what we've chatted about, Claudia, pretty well?
Yeah, we've talked about it like for hours and
Right,
hours. Because we've had the opposite, right? We've had people that are like, nope, we're out of here, which then would leave members in the chapter feeling like excluded, right? Like, okay, I guess it doesn't matter. And you have to be responsible and careful, right? Especially if it's newer members, because then they may identify the whole organization. They may tie the whole organization to this way of thought and being. So you always have to remember you're representing our organization. This is the difference between you all meeting at Starbucks and using the BNI name, right? So when you're using the organization, you have to think of what is aligned, what is their mission and their vision and their values, and decide like, okay, am I going to just go rogue and have somebody feel excluded, or am I going to have somebody, feel like, okay, I don't understand. I don't know where you're at, but I want to make sure that everyone feels included, that anyone that walks through this door or joins this meeting feels included. And so I think that's what we have to focus on. So I think, again, in some chapters, yeah, like they're going to do it anyway. Like, we're not saying, you have our blessing necessarily, but I think that some chapters, they really have made an effort this last year. My own chapter I can speak to, they made sure of like, using James Baldwin quotes at the end of the meeting, like, or during like Women in History Month, we used all women's quotes. Like, it was just, and it wasn't something I had asked for, like they just did it. They just were like, well, because of this is what we're doing. And they started to say some things and sort of insert them in different places in the meeting. They didn't make the meeting about it, but they just like kind of let it know like, hey, yeah, this is what we're committed to. And which again, makes other members feel really, really welcome. So yeah.
There's not a perfect answer, Steve. I mean, as you can imagine, I mean, this, depending on where you're at and who you are, it's like this could either do this or do this for you. And I think work with your director consultant probably.
So there is a positive part two to your story, Dan. But the person who asked the question said, I restarted with half the group and then he joined it. So he is part of this new group that has reformed.
I didn't follow.
That's Andrew at the very bottom, yeah.
I believe it restarted with half the group and then I joined it. Okay.
Oh, nice.
That's good news.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it might be the one I'm talking about, the one Dan's talking about, but that's.
Yeah, I guess we need to follow up with what happened. We don't have.
Yeah. Send us a message. Yeah, that's great. We want to know more.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Let's get into a couple of pretty serious ones. Let's start with this one. Someone in my chapter said something that was clearly discriminatory. Who should I talk to about this?
Dan Haggerty. I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Dan.
No. I mean, for one thing, and this I hate to always answer with depends, but the membership committee is built to handle these types of things. And if someone violates the code of ethics, that is grounds for removal from the chapter. So that's probably, but then of course the next question is going to be, the person that said this was on the membership committee, right? I assume that's going to be the follow-up.
Typically.
And actually somebody said, we should go directly to that person first to seek understanding, which, I mean, obviously there needs to be some sort of a process where it's not just occurred and then, now we're calling, Claudia or something. But I will also throw, you in there, Claudia. diversity@bni.com is a good email address to get a hold of us, to kind of look into stuff like this as well.
Yeah, they can definitely, it comes to us afterwards. So you can feel free to send it. It doesn't come directly to me, but then it will eventually get to me. So if you have something like this that comes up and you don't feel comfortable, because Andrew, that is a good point. Steve knows I've led a lot of vice president trainings over the years in Massachusetts. So I'm always telling people, if you can try to resolve it with someone else, yes. However, I feel like there's certain cases where we shouldn't try to push people. You want to be careful. Sexual discrimination or harassment, racial discrimination or sexual harassment. Those are things that we don't want to say, oh, well, did you talk to them again? If they don't feel comfortable having that conversation, you should be able to go to your director, but you have that email as a backup if you don't feel like it can be resolved on your own. So we want you to know, because I hear stories every single day, every week, I'm getting emails, messages about things that are happening, people not feeling safe or supported. And so we don't want that to happen, right? We want everyone to be able to coexist in your spaces. And so we want to make sure that we're doing our best job.
All right, here's one that pops up a lot. Are there any rules or consequences for BNI members' offensive social media posts? Social media is intertwined in our BNI group since we try to refer business via Facebook and other means.
Yeah, I mean, well, go ahead, Claudia, you got something.
No, I will definitely let you take this one first.
I mean, it comes down, first of all, it comes down to referability, and this isn't just about, this just isn't about race. I mean, and that's why you always have to remember too with politics is that whether you like it or not, 50% of the country agrees with you and 50% of the country, thinks you're crazy, right? So anytime you start to go out onto social media and express your opinions, 50% of the people love it and 50% don't. And if you're starting to express opinions that alienate that 50% and cause them to not want to do business with you, then yes, you have freedom of speech, but you may have fewer sales. So it's all about sort of balancing that act. I think when it comes to things like racist, and I assume that the person is asking these questions in terms of posts that could be deemed racist and whatnot, then I would say that still fits what I just said. I mean, you're going to eliminate your ability to get and give referrals. But B, I think it also does broach the code of ethics for your membership as well. So I generally recommend against it. But at the same time, I fully recognize that, like, listen, you have a right to say things, but you also will endure the consequences when you say those things. So I just, in general, for me, social media is not the place where I like to hang out and express all of my opinions on everything.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that as well. I mean, it's really, yeah, it's just like my son, right? My son is going to be a junior in college. And always, of course, whether he listens to me or not, but we tell kids, like, you got to be careful what you put out there, because once it's out there, it's real, right? If I capture a screenshot, I don't care if you deleted it, right? They all use Snapchat, it goes away, but somebody can take one screenshot and it's out there forever. So nothing is really temporary. So you have to remember how you represent yourself is really, really important. Like the way that you carry yourself, because again, especially, I mean, even this is more for our director teams, you're representing a certain area or group of individuals, right? And they may see something and they might not feel comfortable, working under you, or might have a view of BNI. So it's really, really important to make sure that you're being responsible when posting on social media. And that goes for everybody. I agree.
Okay, just jumping back into the chat here, Charlie, who is on the DEI panel, says the model minority myth with regard to Asian Americans may be seen if we consciously or subconsciously think Asian Americans who are members of BNI should be in the green, right?
Oh, yes.
Those assumptions that we make.
See, I knew she'd have a better answer than me. Yeah, no. So Charlie, who identifies as in the AAPI community and who was on our last talk last month. Yeah, absolutely, right? Because so for those that don't know about the model minority myth, it's usually in the thought process of that, like, folks who are typically in that AAPI community are the smartest and the best. They're the better minorities compared to the others. And they usually are successful, right? Like they usually have money or whatever the case is. And so that's a perfect example, Charlie, of talking about being in the green, right? If you're being like at the top of your Power of One report, you should always be doing it, because that's what you all do, right? That's like generalizing people. So you have to be really, really careful about that, for sure.
All right, final question is actually a comment, and it says, I don't think DEI is related to politics. It's about people, compassion for people. And a good way to end, I think.
That is a good way to end. I mean, we chatted about this almost a year ago now, that this is not religion or politics. It's humanity and human rights, and that's the position that we've chosen to take. So that's why we have this forum today. That's why we have Claudia leading our panel. That's why we have DEI heavily represented at the conference. That's why we have a 3+1 guidebook coming up. That's why we have more training modules coming, and that's why we're navigating these waters together as a BNI family. So I'm just excited to be a part of it. I'm honored to work with the DEI panel. It's an amazing group to be a part of and to watch the things that they've accomplished over the last few months. And the fact that it's leading us to here and next week, I think, is a testament to the hard work of that group and everyone throughout BNI who wants us to be a stronger, more diverse family.
All right, well, thanks everybody for being on today, and we'll have another one next month with plenty of notice, as we said, and we look forward to seeing you on then. So thanks and have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.